good evening, and welcome. Tonight we'll be going over the history and geography of Kosovo. Before we get into the history, let's do geography first, just to get it out of the way before we have a serious talk about Kosovo. We can see that Kosovo borders Montenegro. It borders Albania, very important. It borders North Macedonia, and then there's this disputed border with Serbia. Now, Kosovo is divided into two historic areas. There's the historic Kosovo, and this area is known as Metohija, I believe it's pronounced. There's not a lot of Kosovar resources out there to confirm a lot of these pronunciations, so feel free to correct me, but I'm pretty sure it's pronounced Metohija. It's this section over here. Kosovo has a lot of mountains going through it, kind of like almost diagonal lines of mountains across, and in between are these beautiful river valleys, the most famous of which is the Kosovo Plain, it's known as, and that's where you can find the capital city of Pristina. The mountains are pretty neat. They are karst mountains, so they're very jagged and interestingly formed. The Shar Mountains kind of jut out of the landscape here. They're pretty cool. And these mountains over here are known as the Accursed Mountains, which is a fantastic name. And honestly, that's about it for geography. It's a very small area, very beautiful mountains and valleys. And, this whole corner of the Balkans is very beautiful. So it has just as much fantastic scenery as many of the other countries. I'm not going to be showing you a Google Earth tablet view of Kosovo just because Google Earth doesn't offer very much to show you, so I'm going to be doing a voiceover slideshow at the end of history so that you can see some of the more famous sites. Also, I'm using a different arm to film this with, and it's a little wobbly, so I apologize for the wobbles. I've set it up in the least wobbly way possible, but it's still wobbly. So, anyway, let's talk about Kosovo, because some of you may have never heard of Kosovo. And that is because Kosovo is not recognized by about half of the countries in the UN. It is disputed between Serbia up here. Serbia considers Kosovo still a part of Serbia. Kosovo had a declaration of independence a few decades ago. And it's very, very contentious. As you're going to learn, there is a lot of history behind the ethnic divisions of this area. And I don't mean to offend anyone, especially since I know I have a lot of Serbian viewers who are probably already leaving angry comments, but I know a lot of the younger generations don't really care, so I'm kind of relying on that. But it's still very contentious, especially politically, so this channel is a place for relaxation, it's a place for education, and it's a place for world peace. So those are my 3 goals for this channel, is to bring everyone together in a very relaxing way and to learn about every area around the world. So I also live in a country that recognizes Kosovo, so I'm going to cover Kosovo. It's in my map book and everything, so may as well. So with that being said, whenever something very terrible happens between the Albanian Kosovars and the Serbs that live in this area or lived in the area, I'm just going to mention that very terrible things happened between those people, and you can use your imagination because I do not want to go into details about it because they are very terrible. Imagine ethnic conflict. It's all of the things you could possibly imagine happened during ethnic conflicts. Terrible things occurred on both sides. This is not a video to debate who is right or who is wrong, who is the hero in the story, who's the villain. I'm not about to do that. So I'm just going to say that very terrible things happened. Both sides have committed horrible atrocities against the other. We're not going to go into details about what those were, like I said. So just note that when I say that there was ethnic tensions and violence, that's what I mean. And it's going to occur many times in history. This little corner of the world has been so hotly debated for so long. It's very interesting, so let's get into it. There apparently hasn't been a lot of archaeological research into the region of Kosovo, but what has occurred has uncovered really amazing cave paintings, some artifacts, burial grounds of the various ancient cultures that lived here. The first very prominent one were the Dardani, and they named this area, which is bigger than what Kosovo's borders are today. It kind of spread out around here. They named it Dardania. It was eventually annexed by Rome in the 1st century CE. They also called it Dardania. And later it became part of the Byzantine Empire. It was like a satellite state. For a minute, the Bulgaria's just over here, took it over for a minute. The Byzantines took it back. Just a side note. There are also lots of different raids from other ethnic groups during that time, and it's when the Slavic migration occurred between the 6th and 7th centuries, not just into Kosovo, but into the entire Baltic region. Not Baltic, Balkan region. Not the Baltic. Well, I think there were some Serbs in the Baltic, but we're talking about the Balkans today. Serbian migration into the Balkans, including Kosovo. Now, in Kosovo at this point, there was a population of Albanians. I'm not going to say it was overly populated by Albanians. There were Albanians here at the time. Were they the majority? Probably. The history between the various ethnicities that have lived in Kosovo in ancient times is debatable. I think it depends on what side the historian is appealing to. So I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm going to leave it as impartial as possible, but as I pointed out, Albania is right here. So it's natural that, since lines weren't drawn or anything at that point, that there were Albanians living in Kosovo, and the Serbs slowly moved in as well. Eventually, the area known as Kosovo today would come under Serbian rule, thanks to Stefan Nemanja and the eventual Nemanjić dynasty, which later would become the Serbian Empire. Kosovo was a very important part of the Serbian Empire. It was sort of the religious heart. They were Orthodox Christians, and many churches and monasteries were built in what is now Kosovo today. And they're considered national treasures. They're still around today. In 1389, probably one of the most pivotal years of Serbian, Balkan, Kosovar, etc. history. 1389 is an important one because that was the Battle of Kosovo. The Ottomans were invading, the Serbs were prepared to defend their territory, and they met in Kosovo Plain. I think it was just about right up here. I looked it up on Google Earth. It's just, there's a neighborhood of houses there now. Can you believe that? Very historic site. And there was a big old battle. The Ottomans were eventually the victors. And slowly but surely, this area came under the control of the Ottoman Empire. It was official by 1455, and they would stay until 1912, but I'll get back to that. Of course, the Ottomans were Muslim, so the religion of Islam was introduced into the country and the area, but it wasn't fully accepted into Kosovo for a couple more decades, and I'll talk about that too. Or will I? I'm glancing over my notes to see if I do talk about that. I don't think I do. So I don't. In the 1700s, the Ottomans began a series of very political persecutions against Christians in the area. Like I said, there are Orthodox Christians in the area here. They would do things, most famously, they would make the Christians pay higher taxes than the Muslims, but there were other things that were basically swaying people to convert. And during the mid to late 1700s was when the majority of Albanians would convert to Islam. And it's a majority Muslim area today. It still is, I should say. In the 1870s, Albanian nationalism sparked in the area. Various ethnic nationalism movements in general were sparking up in the area, particularly in Serbia. Serbian independence was declared during this time. They fought off the Ottomans during the war there. And they weren't too happy about Muslims being in their territory. So this is when the conflict begins. This is when the ethnic tension and violence begins. And I'm just going to leave it at that. There are various exoduses, expulsions, things like that, of the different ethnic groups in the area, the Serbian Orthodox Christians and the Kosovar Albanian Muslims. Yeah, we're going to leave it at that. In 1912, over in Turkey, which was the heart of the Ottoman Empire, there was a coup. And the political instability led to war in the Balkans, and many of the states that were still under Ottoman control managed to fight for freedom. In particular, there were a lot of Albanians in the Ottoman military, since they were Muslim, and many of them abandoned their posts because they didn't want to fight their relatives, So that was a big part of how this rebellion was successful over in not just Kosovo, but a lot of the Balkans. In 1913, the Treaty of London figured out what to do with all of these areas that were now independent. They gave half of the country, pretty much like this half, I believe. They gave it to Montenegro, and they gave the other half, which was like all of this over here, to Serbia. So there was no independent Kosovo at that time. They were part of two different countries. And as you can imagine, there was a lot more ethnic tension and violence. But like I said, use your imagination. There was a brief period where Austria came in and occupied, and I want to say the 1700s. But they were defeated by the Ottomans. Well, during World War I, they would get their revenge. They would come back and occupy the area again. But they would very famously lose World War I. In 1918, a lot of these countries came together to form the Kingdom of Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes, which Kosovo was a part of. It would later become known as Yugoslavia, as more ethnicities joined that weren't Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes. And as you can imagine, there was a lot of ethnic tension in the area and some violence during this time. There were some bigger fish to fry in Yugoslavia before World War II, but there was still a lot of ethnic tension in the area. In 1941, during World War II, the Axis powers invaded. Albania was under control of fascist Italy, so they gave the area to Albania, since, majority Albanians living here. And that wasn't great. When World War II ended, the Kosovar people were like, we are never joining Albania, even though we are Albanians. Albania, if you haven't seen my Albania video, Albania in the 20th century was a bizarre place. And you did not want to be a part of it. So in the 1950s, when Yugoslavia was reformed, Josip Broz Tito was in control of Yugoslavia. He was a communist, but he had his own brand of communism. It was, I'm going to do communism my own way. In Albania was Enver Hoxha, who said, I'm going to do communism my own way. I kind of relate to, if you have to compare these types of communism, I would say Yugoslavia was kind of close to the Cuban form of communism, whereas Albania was close to the North Korean version of communism. Two very different extremes, but extremes nonetheless. Obviously, people were worried that the Albanians living here were going to connect with the Albanians over here, which the people here were like, no way, these people are weird. which I think Albanians will agree with that statement, especially at this point in history. It was a weird time in Albania, and the people here wanted nothing to do with it. So there was, like I said, a lot of ethnic tension in the area, to the point where peaceful protests were beginning, that they wanted their own special recognition. And Tito granted it in 1974. Kosovo was granted its semi-autonomy, I should say. In the 1990s is when not just Yugoslavia, but a lot of communist regimes collapsed upon themselves as the old rulers died off, especially after Tito died. So Kosovo saying, hey, listen, we were given autonomy under the control of Yugoslavia. We do not want to join Albania because they are weird. We don't want to join Serbia because they are aggressive. So we want to be independent. And it was never fully recognized. So in 1996, the KLA was formed, the Kosovo Liberation Army. And they did not take things peacefully. They took things violently against the Serbs. Which, if you know your Serbian history, Serbia just fought a really horrendous war against Bosnia and Herzegovina. Another ethnic tension, let's say, more ethnic violence between Christians and Muslims. So it looked like the same thing was happening here, and it certainly did. The Kosovo War broke out, and it was a very bad one. War crimes, genocide, it was terrible. So NATO and the UN intervened as quickly as they could because they did not want a repeat of the Bosnian War. In 1998, I want to say, NATO said, our solution to this is to bomb Serbia. So they bombed Serbia. The UN's solution to this in 1999 was just to take over control of Kosovo and monitor peacekeeping operations themselves so that, the people living in the area weren't involved. And that lasted for a few years until they relinquished the area back to Kosovo. Elections were held, things like that. And in 2008, on February 17th, Kosovo declared its independence. Now, of course, Serbia did not recognize that. They still do not. Serbia is insistent that Kosovo is part of Serbia, mostly due to the fact that Kosovo's history is so closely tied with Serbian identity. Like I said, the Battle of Kosovo changed the course of Serbian history forever, and there are many beloved Serbian religious sites built in Kosovo, which, remember, this is a majority Muslim country, and there are these beautiful, gorgeous Orthodox churches all throughout the area that Serbians view as cultural treasures. So they're not willing to part with Kosovo. Meanwhile, Kosovo's very willing to part with Serbia because of, the war crimes and things. Not to mention the long history of persecutions against the other. But talks are going on. They're really not going anywhere. At least not at the time of recording this. So that is essentially where Kosovo is today. Times have become much, much more peaceful in Kosovo. There have been various riots over how independence has been slow going. But that was quite a few years ago. Nowadays, it's a very peaceful area. And yeah, that is where Kosovo is today. So I'm going to show you a little slideshow and record voiceover over it and tell you about some of the interesting landmarks of Kosovo. So I decided to narrow down this little slideshow to 3 different places around Pristina. The first one I want to show you is the Newborn Monument. This was unveiled the day that Kosovo declared its independence, and the artist picked an English phrase just to kind of sum up the concept of a new beginning, a new birth of a new country. And what's neat about it is that it gets redecorated often. I have pictures here of the 5-year anniversary of independence, where it was painted with all of the flags that recognized Kosovo, and the really neat 10-year independence commemoration. It's a spot that everyone has to visit when you go to Pristina. Next, I want to show you the National Library. This is a really remarkable building, and if you Google or look up any pictures of sights to see in Pristina, this is always the first thing that pops up. This is located on the campus of the University of Kosovo, and the architecture is very distinct in that it is meant to combine Byzantine and Ottoman architectural styles in a more modern viewpoint, and it's a really remarkable building. And then almost right next door to the National Library is this Orthodox church. It's called the Christ the Savior Cathedral, and construction on it began just before the Kosovo War, and then of course construction was halted and it was never resumed. And this place, how do I describe this? It doesn't have the best reputation because since it is an abandoned building project, it does get vandalized, sometimes with some really nasty things about Christianity or Orthodox Christianity. But it has become a very interesting symbol of the war and really what religion has, like the role of religion in the history of Kosovo. I don't know how to describe it. I guess a lot of people are very ashamed of it, mainly because it was built in a primarily Muslim area, and since it just sits there abandoned and empty. But there are people who want to make it an official memorial or a monument of some kind, but since the mid-1990s it has been sitting there incomplete. So those were the main things that I wanted to show you in Kosovo. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that this video was relaxing and educational, and I hope that you have a very good